Of course they are. I do have it written in like big red letters, like record the meeting in my meeting notes.
Wait, did you want me to start?
No, that's perfect.
Yeah, okay.
I think we are actually at quorum, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wow, great. Cool. Hi, everyone. Well, hey, Ted. Welcome. You're in perfect timing. Welcome to our February Pedestrian and Transit Advisory Committee meeting. Zach is our acting secretary. Thank you, Zach. We'll start with roll call, and I'll start with our PTEC members first, and then we'll get into guests, and you'll have a chance to introduce yourselves. We'll start with Ted Alexander.
Here.
Ginny Alverson. I don't see Ginny. Caroline Bodiger.
Here.
Meredith Brown.
Here.
Laura Evans.
Here.
Christopher Ferry.
Here.
Vitor Pamplona.
Here.
Zach Rosenberg.
Here.
Alessandra Sider, myself. Harold Vugaris is not coming tonight. Willem Ba is our city council rep, and he is not here. Lauren Craik.
Here.
And Justin Schreiber is usually our ex officio, but today we have Kate White. Welcome.
Hey, yeah.
Great. So I want to have our guests introduce themselves. We'll start with in person and then move to online. For online, Karen, you know how this goes, but for those of you who don't, when I say your name, you'll have a pop-up on your screen that asks you to unmute, and then you can start speaking. So just say your name, your ward, a little bit about why you're here tonight, if there's something on the agenda that interests you in particular. Anything else you want to say? Let's start with you.
Hey, my name is Preston Catilius. I'm living in Ward 5. I'm sitting in, trying to figure out how I can be involved and kind of know more on what's ongoing with the committee. So I can, inform friends, family, and try to do whatever I can.
Cool.
Cool. I am Zev Pogrebin. I'm also a Ward 5 resident. And I don't have any specific reason, but the maybe discussion about Davis Square might be interesting. I went to the meeting on that a couple of weeks ago and be interested to learn some more from this side. So yeah, awesome.
Can you sorry, can you say your name again?
My name is Zev Pogrebin.
Okay, cool. Thanks.
Hi. I think this is loud enough. My name is Nick Mellis. I recently moved here about 6 months ago. I think I live in Ward 6. And I'm a transportation planner, and I'm interested in learning more about the committee.
Yes.
Let's go to our online guests. Is that Talia? Am I seeing that correctly on the screen? I think you have to ask them to unmute.
She put some information in the chat or the Q&A if that's helpful.
Oh, great.
Context.
Beautiful. I'm joining via phone, so I'm not sure how to unmute. Makes total sense. My name is Talia, and I'm a final year social work student at Boston College. Awesome. Welcome. We're so happy to have you. And I also see Karen.
Hi, Karen Malloy here. I'm sorry my video is not working. I'm not sure why, but anyway, I'm with STEP and SAS, and I'm here mainly for the discussion about Union Square, Davis Square, the Davis Square plan and the mobility aspects of it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. There's a lot happening in both squares. So.
I know there's a lot happening everywhere.
It's all good. Did I get everybody? Great. Okay, so let's approve or discuss our January minutes. Does anybody have proposed amendments? Great, seeing none, I motion to approve the minutes. Do I have a second?
I'll second. This is Ted.
Thanks, Ted. All in favor of approving our January minutes, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Okay, minutes approved. Just a brief administrative update before we jump into subcommittee updates. Our PTAC new member applications are now closed. They closed on February 9th. Do you have a final count of how many applications we got?
Like Friday morning, it was 42, and I think it was higher than that in the
Yeah, I
end.
believe we reached over 64
Yeah.
for total
Wow.
for both.
Oh, for both, yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you guys for posting all of that and doing all the work. So Carol, Vitor, and myself will be joining Mobility to conduct interviews over the next few weeks. And I don't really know if we have like a clear timeline on when we're going to be selecting new members, but right.
Yeah, so interviews will start in the next couple weeks, and then there's quite a few interviews to get through. And so I think we're hoping to get back to everyone between like 30 to 60 days, depending on how interview scheduling goes.
Great. Any questions on the new member process applications, anything? Okay, great. Moving into subcommittee updates. Did policy and enforcement get a chance to meet this month?
No, we did not meet this month.
Okay, thank you. How about, I know engineering and evaluation met.
Yes, we did. We met with Adam and talked through some of the upcoming intersection projects, gave some feedback, which I now realize I did not send to the full subcommittee. Alessandra, I know you asked me to do that. I forgot.
That's okay.
But we provided a bunch of comments and asked some questions on the various intersections. I think broadly our feedback was very supportive. We're very happy to see these go forward. Laura, do you have anything, or Vitor else that you want to add? I'll send the feedback we have to the group as well.
I think that's a good summary.
Are there any of the intersections that you're like particularly excited about?
I personally, I live on Cameron Ave, so that's an exciting one. It's going to be happening on my walk to work every day.
I think the hardest design will be the Somerville Avenue with Central Street. That place is a little bit crazy right now. So I think Adam was not expecting the level of feedback we gave him, but you know, I think it's gonna be good in the end. We just need to figure out more or alternatives that also account for the parking lot, for the Walgreens over there, and the USPS store or the UPS store, which is on the other side of the road. If we account for all that, I think we can have a good intersection there.
Awesome. Thank you guys for doing that deep dive. Really helpful. Ted, can I turn to you for education and engagement?
Sure, yeah. So we did meet with Kate and talked about the mobility division's draft strategic plan for community engagement, which is really exciting document. Kate's taking me and putting that together. And we, just had some suggestions. I mean, it has a, and it's gonna be public, right? Or
Yeah.
it will be, okay. So you'll see it at some point, but it's gonna have, sections on how to do community engagement campaigns and what the kinds of, outreach will be done and sort of what to cover and when to do it and all kinds of things, many details. So we gave some feedback, had a great discussion with Kate about that, and it was great to see the mobility division doing that.
Cool. So our big ticket item for the night is talking about the Davis Square commercial area plan. It's a massive document, so, if you read the whole thing, then congratulations. But we're focusing on the mobility and curb use sections, and the civic spaces and streetscape sections. So I think we have a presentation, and then we'll have, time for feedback and discussion. But even if you didn't get a chance to really like dig into the plan, that's okay. I would be surprised if, not everybody in this room had at least some feedback on what they'd like to see in Davis Square. So feel free to just bring that into your, into the discussion as well.
Hi, everyone. Again, my name, excuse me, Kate White. For those joining virtually, if you have any trouble hearing me, if you could just indicate it by chat or audibly, I'll make sure to speak up. But I'm here to talk a little bit about the Davis Square area plan. And we've also reserved some time to talk about the recent Davis Square signal upgrades. I'm really gonna talk about this in a high level. I think the 35 minutes really wanted to give you space to discuss as a committee, kind of initial feedback or thoughts or priorities. Then as Alessandra shared, really encourage folks to dig in if you have the opportunity. We really tried to organize in a way that it's clear. If you're focused on the mobility aspects, you can see those recommendations clearly, both in the more executive summary section, but in some of the kind of outline recommendations further in the document. So for folks who may not have been involved for a while or have been, or have been involved, originally this plan, there's been various forms of this plan over the last 10 years or kind of efforts for this document. But really around 2020, when we experienced, the beginnings of the pandemic, the city really wanted to focus in on the commercial area. And so this plan was halted after the 2017 and 2019 process and kind of restarted. So you'll see if you're looking at the visuals, there is a map kind of highlighting the specific commercial areas. So it stretches on those kind of main streets like Elm Street, Highland, College Ave and Holland Street, and kind of those maybe those first couple blocks into those streets. So really focusing on that commercial center. With any of our visioning plans, it's really a visioning plan to serve the area for multiple decades. The goal of this process is set forth that broad vision for this specific commercial area to guide, future development, creation of new civic spaces, and then really kind of think through the future for our streetscapes. The full document has a range of recommendations, really kind of categorized here. It's economic development, civic spaces and streetscapes, mobility and curb use. So as you see those two, they're really focused on the transportation aspects. And then there's other aspects in there too. So really, we're going to focus in on the transportation ones today, but if you're interested in learning more about small business support and economic vitality, those are also available in the plan. So we've kind of summarized for you here the main mobility recommendations. First and foremost, really prioritizing public transit in the area. It already serves so many of our bus routes and has been highlighted by bus network redesign. So really thinking through how do you help serve that bus to get through smoothly and comfortably through things like lanes, traffic signal upgrades and routing. We also want to make the experience of waiting for the bus better. So thinking about comfortable bus stops and shelters. In addition, we're looking to think of more sustainable ways for vehicles. And so thinking of adding or trying to explore ways to add more charging locations in existing lots and in other areas. If you're familiar with the city's citywide parking and curb use study, a lot of the recommendations that are in the Davis Square area plan align with the recommendations that came out of that study. Which actually, if you're looking for anyone to talk to, VTOR was on the task force. So another great resource. This is really looking at deprioritizing vehicle storage. So what we mean by being able to park a vehicle for a long amount of time on the street and really looking at other ways to kind of more effectively use that curb. So that could be for quick pickup, it was 5 to 10 minute, using the space for 5 to 10 minutes, active use. So this could be anything like bike facilities, and well as parklets or other civic space. Then really diving into the parking management aspect, as we really try to think for any of our commercial areas, is expanding our loading opportunities. So this is both our commercial loading with our, the larger kind of 40-foot trucks but also box trucks and, smaller vehicles that provide products to local businesses. We also want to look at better managing Ubers and Lyfts through ride hail and food delivery, which we know is really active in the Davis Square area. We want to look at things like exploring demand-based metered pricing. So what that means is that at higher demand times, you can increase the cost of the meter, to then hopefully to encourage more turnover or open space. And then looking at some of those side streets, like your Chesters, your Days, your Dovers, for more shorter term parking. And by that, we're probably thinking more of your kind of 2-hour window, rather than where a lot of those locations are, would be more resident permit, which allow you, that unlimited amount of time. And then it would also be to leverage private off-street parking lots. And what this means is looking at some of our new developments that might, create off-street lots, making that a publicly accessible resource. And then the next couple are pretty intuitive, but in implementing signal improvements, that's both to support better, better opportunities for people crossing the street, as well as really trying to think through how do we manage vehicle volumes in the area. But again, prioritizing safety rather than vehicle throughput. Really implementing the bicycle network plan. So if you're interested in learning more about that, there are recommendations in the Davis Square area plan, but also the larger bicycle network plan that has a vision for the next 20 years. For a connected network for people of all ages and abilities. And then lastly, really looking at improving sidewalk conditions. There were some improvements made over the last couple of months with really looking through that accessible path, reconstructed in concrete, but still providing some of that kind of Davis, especially Davis vibe, but some of the aesthetic of Davis with some of the brick accent standard. I ran through those pretty fast, but again, happy to dive into that anymore, but encourage folks to check out the larger plan for details. Just wanted to highlight some of the civic spaces. We talked kind of transportation, now moving into those civic or public spaces. The ones we're going to focus on the most are the proposed Elmway, which really kind of comes from your Day Street to that Grove Street area, and then a proposed plaza at Cutter, which is that little parking lot that's right outside Davis Square or Davis Donuts. So diving into Elm, this is, so kind of if you're at the most western end of Elm, right now where you see the slip lane that's closed outside of Mike's, this would be making that permanent and reconstructing that area to make it a plaza, similar to just on the opposite side of the street, the Statue Plaza, which we see high usage out of. And when I go through these civic spaces, I just want to note, again, this is a visioning plan. At this time, none of these are active projects. The goal is to have this plan that would allow us to do these types of projects in the future. So this is a visual, the kind of, or a conceptual illustration to give you an idea of what that could look like, but there have not been any developed designs yet. But in this space, we propose thinking about things like public seating instead of being just for like maybe a specific business. If you have publicly accessible seating and tables. And again, really increasing our tree canopy coverage, which aligns with a lot of recommendations in Summer Vision 2040. Then moving kind of more east along Elm Street, or I guess that's more kind of southeast, pardon me for my cardinal directions. Looking at converting that segment of Elm Street, like I mentioned, kind of by that start by Day, just kind of like by the Old Oak Pizza, right? You're kind of moving closer towards Porter Square to Grove. Really making this a pedestrian space. So it could be curbless, it could have different kinds of pavers. We don't know yet, but really allowing folks to use the full width of that street. We would look at, because of the commercial activity in the area, there could be opportunities to accommodate that during off-peak hours. So you might have seen in other places, the use of maybe bollards at one end, correct? And then those can go down and allow vehicles at very designated specific times of day. Bicycle access could be permitted, but there would be no dedicated facilities. It would really be a shared space. But really to be determined is what would occur for the routes that go through Elm Street at this time. And then lastly, I'll talk about Cutter Plaza. This would be converting that small parking lot, as I mentioned. It served as kind of another public space, as another gateway to the square. It could even kind of expand really into that first block of Summer Street, where, as you know, when you're traveling Elm, it veers to the right and then it goes off to the left to go to Summer Street. And it could be more of a pocket park to just offer more open area and more permanent seating to just support people being in the place, being in the square. And then allowing, you know, again, just kind of just centering people. So that's what we have for you today for just like a high level look at the area plan. In the agenda, I think linked was the full document, the recording of the public meeting that occurred a couple weeks ago, as well as the slide materials that were shared there. But just wanted to, you know, kind of support any discussion around initial thoughts or priorities for the area, as well as happy to clarify any information.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kate. Anybody thoughts in the room, questions? Also online, feel free to unmute yourself or raise your hand or put questions in the chat.
So just a quick question about the bollard idea you mentioned. You know, it's not a formal part of the design, but is there any kind of obstacle to doing that, kind of regulatory or something? 'Cause I wondered why we don't see more of those raising bollards around here, right on places.
That's a great question. To my knowledge, I'm not sure if there's regulatory, or prohibitions.
Yeah.
I think it's much more of what makes sense in terms of like operations. So some we've seen in other cities, it's automated, right? They can come down and up. I think there's actually an example in Cambridge Crossing near, I think Holt's Business School has something where they have like movable up and down bollards. Then there are bollards like you see on the community path, which are more permanent, and then they have a locking mechanism that are removed for snow removal. So I think it just depends on like what would be the ultimate use or ultimately used and operational. And if it's something like time limited, maybe that would be something more automated. But yeah, at this time, we don't have any designs and bollards are kind of just one way to indicate that that is a kind of closed off area.
Great, thanks. I support that idea. If you do that, I think it's a great design element that really shows it's a pedestrian space.
Well, I wanna go crazy a little bit. Have we thought about doing a tunnel? Moving the road underground, letting cars go through, just like we have on Harvard Square, and then fully close Elm for pedestrians.
Like a
Like the
Somerville
entire-
Big Dig.
Yeah. A tiny dig, yes.
Small.
That is a great question. I don't know if we have considered that.
Because we have the T station over there, which can be a problem, but it can also be an opportunity to integrate, you know, the bus station down there with the T and kind of facilitate transporting there.
Yeah, I mean, great question. Happy to kind of follow up around if it's been considered. I think the only initial response I would have to that is obviously, tunnel projects are very expensive. And that instead of, and also the construction could be very, invasive and disruptive. And so I think it's really, I think longer term, we're looking at why do we revise the network? And so that Elm Street isn't needed as much as a kind of, you know, right now Highland is one direction, Elm is the other.
Right.
And again, Highland too, it would probably need to be paired, right, with Elm Street becoming shared use. So really looking at the network, rather than maybe still facilitating that same throughput. And
I'm
again,
not
I
even
think
thinking
Lauren,
about the same throughput, it's more like closing Elm entirely and doing a new project for the city, which is just, you know, an entire section of Elm fully closed and fully open to pedestrians in a much nicer environment. Maybe we can have a bigger plaza for everybody to have the meeting tables there. I don't know. Like I said, it's a crazy idea.
I mean, I think this is for discussion, correct? Yeah.
Nick, I saw your hand.
I was curious if you could talk more about the impact that Highland would have if Elm were to be close to cars.
Yeah, I mean, so it digs into it a little bit more in the plan. So my apologies if I don't have all the details right in front, happy to pull that up. But given, right now, right, Highland kind of heads westbound, northbound. Again, my apologies, my cardinal directions aren't very good. But you're heading into the square. And so, we anticipate that Highland would be converted to two-way, travel. Which again, Highland Ave is also designated for protected bike lanes in both directions in the bicycle network plan. But then we think that if Highland is two-way, that could omit that other leg of Elm Street. which again, I think long term, we were really looking to kind of decomplicate or uncomplicate, sorry, Davis Square as the many approaches, right? Make it a really complex intersection.
So you think there's enough space on Highland to have cars in two directions and bike lanes?
That's something that we are aiming to implement. Yeah, I mean, currently there are a basic bike lane, parking on both sides and then 2 vehicle lanes. I don't know the exact width off the top of my head. And then there's also opportunities, right, if that bike lane is sidewalk level, that width can be slightly narrower. And so there, I think really once we get into a potential project, that's where we can dig into to what extent is what feasible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I saw Christopher's too, or Christopher's hand raised.
Yeah, the one thing I was thinking is also thinking a little bit more three-dimensionally. If we are looking at turning Elm Street into a mostly pedestrian boulevard or pedestrianized street, the idea of working with the building owners or with the pillars and such to put in shade scrims, maybe seasonally, so that that area doesn't get as hot when the sun is blowing, straight down on it. I know for outdoor seating, there were a couple times where some of the restaurants didn't have people in them just because the sun was right there on it. And something, even reflective could help keep that paved space cooler in the summer, which, as a heat management thing is something the city needs to look at in the coming decade or more. So.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
I guess in that vein, like, it looks like there is the possibility for a lot more trees along a pedestrianized Elm Street. Is that the hope kind of conceptually?
Yeah, I think with it being, like really or like kind of a pedestrianized street is that you're not restricted to having, a specific sidewalk, which only you would have trees located in. Or, even having to focus on specific, I mean, I get this terminology, right, but you're not looking at the like specific vehicle lanes because they're not really a thing anymore. I think if the only thing that we would still allow is, right, just really wanting to think through those commercial loading, but that doesn't have to, that could be much more. An example I think we kind of like, but they haven't used trees right in the placement is, in Harvard Square, kind of like by like Pete's and goodness, I forget the names of the businesses all there, but right there kind of in that section. Goodness.
Winthrop Square, I think.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like Pete's Coffee, I think it's right near Charlie's.
Yeah, JFK run through it.
Thank you,
Yeah.
yeah, so there's an example of that, really, vehicles are actually allowed on it, but it doesn't feel like they use cobble pavers. And then there's opportunities to place things in those.
Other thoughts, questions?
About the bus, rerouting the buses onto Highlands, have you done any kind of modeling of what that would do to travel times on the bus?
That's a good question, Lauren, would you?
Yeah, so because this isn't like a active plan right now, it's just a visioning plan, we haven't gotten to the stage of modeling, though I know like a lot of different people have started to look at this question of what would it take to pedestrianize Elm, which involves two-way Highland, which really under bus network redesign, we're gonna see a lot of increased bus frequency running through Davis, and so I think the impact of buses is very top of mind. In some ways, it could improve bus runtime. We hear a lot from operators at the MBTA about how difficult it is to get buses through Elm with all of the double parking. And so I think part of us is thinking that if we are able to separate, one's more of a mobility throughput street and one becomes more of a like dwelling pedestrian street, that could be an impact. But I think it's something we have to work with the MBTA on to really understand like what are the current run times and what would be the impact of changing the network.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, because that's just the one concern that I have about it. It seems like the Elm is a very direct route to Porter Square and down to the 87, and the 88 also.
Yeah.
And that just seems like something to take into account, because I didn't, in the plan, I didn't see a actual route planned out for the bus. I think it just says, explore options for rerouting the bus, and it'd be good to see where it would go, because all those streets get kind of congested.
Yeah.
And is part of the plan with those routes as well to think about other non-island options? Because I'm starting to wonder if it makes sense to actually have the bus going through the square instead of getting one of the side roads and kind of preparing those roads to get the traffic of the buses. So kind of avoiding the center of the square, but still going close enough so people can drop by and enjoy the place.
I'll be honest, I think some of the modeling work might have happened before I joined, so I can't speak to all the alternatives they've looked at. I know just because of proximity and because of the one-way pair, I think Highland is the intuitive
Right.
alternative to Elm Street, but I'd have to check if they looked at routing the buses more around Davis. It gets a little tricky with the turning radius, frankly, of MBTA buses on our streets.
Yeah, I think it will be something that we need to prepare for if that is the decision. But because it's just a vision for the future, I think it makes sense to just try to do it right now, see if it even has a possibility of happening.
On the subject of Elm, was there any results or feedback of the cameras that were put out for the bike stops, bus stops? As far as monitoring how often cars were stopped there and ticketing them? I don't know if there was ever anything published on that.
We had a whole meeting on it.
Okay.
Which I can send you.
So I was curious on that, because related to that, and then the on-baited bollards, maybe there could be some way to have the buses travel slowly still through an area that's otherwise pedestrianized, because that might not be much slower than they're already getting through with the way that cars double park there all the time.
Yeah.
And then, bollards open and shut for them, or automated fines for anyone who drives through, or commercial vehicles that go through at hours they're not supposed to.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful feedback. I think, just a note on the safety stick. PTAC had a whole meeting about it, and then I also believe that the director of parking presented the traffic and parking committee, I believe in November. But that's another resource of I think it's the same presentation, right? Which is just, they were able to collect data on how often it occurred and the length of time that folks would park in the bus stop. And then, I think there's all options on the table when it comes to what does the pedestrianized space look like? One thought I just had is that the 88, which I don't recall what it becomes in the bus network redesign. It actually has to run through Elm to get back to Highland, which can then sometimes cause a bit of delay. And so potentially that is one where, would that make more sense to go right straight to Highland? I forget which route it becomes. I know some of the numbers shift.
Yeah, it does shift, but I'm blanking on what number it becomes.
Yeah. Karen, I see your hand raised.
Hi, I can answer that immediate question. It becomes the number 90 bus. And since that's, the bus network redesign thing. But I have a question that's a little bit off the subject of buses, but is related to transit. In the public meeting about the Davis Square plan, Sarah Lewis had a slide about the head house, the Red Line head house next to the Somerville Theater, and it showed, the proposed MBTA plan to put, an elevator, like basically where everybody stands waiting for the bus. And she said it would be great if folks could advocate for redoing the head house. I guess the idea being that the head house blocks, line of sight so badly in that congested area where people are coming out, and there's people are coming out of the T, and there'll be a better hook, better way for people getting on the path, but that head house kind of blocks us line sight at the moment. So I guess the idea is that we should be advocating for a glass head house or something, or I don't know, Kate, is there anything more you can say about that?
Thanks so much for the question. My apologies. I don't have any more information. I was gonna say, Lauren, would you be able to speak to that?
Yeah, so this is also something that we had in a prior PTAC meeting. We asked the MBTA project group to come and speak to the committee, and I believe PTAC wrote a letter with recommendations. So maybe we can circulate that, Karen, to see like what PTAC's sort of design thoughts were of how that design could best be pivoted to get the accessibility upgrades. I think we're also excited about getting at the Davis Head House while also ensuring that the pedestrian experience in that area still feels very like safe and accessible. So it's on the PTAC website, I know, under advocacy letters, but
Okay,
I don't know, Alessandra, if there's anything else to add.
No, I'm just trying to see if I can chat it to you directly, Karen, but I think because you're not a panelist, I cannot, but I have your email, so I'm happy to send it to
okay,
you.
I mean, I'd be happy to, take that back to, groups and have, and write something or whatever, when we're done with McGrath Boulevard and advocate for that. I mean, it would be great to, I mean, obviously we have to have a head house there, but yes, it is sort of like in the way of a lot of stuff that people want to do, so.
Yeah, I think the main thrust of our advocacy on this front was that the project as it stands is to put in elevators, which is great, obviously, like big supporters of accessibility and accessible infrastructure. But that we would love to see a more comprehensive redesign of the head house, because right now, as it stands, just putting in the elevators would create all the problems that you just indicated. And we have the opportunity to create a like modern best practice head house, like the ones that the MBTA has been rolling out more recently.
Okay, great, thanks.
When we say head house, does that just refer to the elevator? Or does that refer to the whole structure there? Because I'm wondering if that's going to be redone, if it could potentially be paired with like commercial development, to use the space above that and kind of create more of like a street wall, plus also potentially raise some of the funding for like make a more modern station at that side.
Yeah, so the head house does refer to the entire structure, and I believe there was a question we did ask, because in particular, the one on the College Ave, there is a small commercial like store availability. And so we did talk to them about what their commercial strategy is, but I think that's a great point to raise up again in the continued advocacy.
Do we know what like point in their, I know they're at 75% design, but
I think it's sort of stationary at 75%. We haven't heard anything back, and they're wrapping up some of the other stations that I think were just a bit further along in terms of like community buy-in.
Gotcha.
Well, I'm sure the bike committee will ask this question, but are we thinking through ways to connect the community path from both sides, both ends of the Davis mismatch?
I think that is definitely kind of talked about at a high level in the plan, recognizing that it would probably be paired with, a lot of different work. In the bicycle network plan, we kind of put together a vision of different options to get through, which would include both protected bike lanes in various parts, as well as neighborways, which are the kind of more low stress, lower volume, and lower speed streets to connect to the square.
I have two questions before we move on to signal improvements, but also if others have questions before we move on, please queue them up. First question, I noticed in the plan that this was before I even moved to Somerville, so I didn't realize it happened, but we did like kind of a temporary Cutter Plaza like installation in 2012, like turning the parking lot into kind of a public space. So I'm just, and it seemed like there was a lot of community excitement for it. So I'm just curious if you had if you could share any insight about like why that wasn't pursued any like closer to 2012.
It's a great question. If it's okay, I would love to follow up with you because, I don't know off the top of my head, kind of the whole kind of project around that.
Okay. And then my second question, Just thinking about like the ride share and pickup drop off behemoth of a problem. Because like the city-owned parking lots seem to show like low utilization rates, or I guess is it the private ones that show low utilization? One of them shows,
Is this from the curb profile and the parking study? I think
yeah, and also included in the Davis plan.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's some parking lot that shows low utilization rates, and I'm just curious if there's potential to like convert space in one of those lots, like for a designated pickup drop-off area. I'm thinking like how they have at the airport, right?
Yeah.
When you go to like a specific location. So I just wonder if there's potential for that, and if like people would be willing to like get dropped off, like, you know, kind of on Buena Vista in that parking lot and then like walk to Davis Square to avoid. I mean, it wouldn't necessarily alleviate like the people who wanna, you know, park right in front of a restaurant to get food and then go deliver it to someone, but maybe it would alleviate like actual, you know, commuter traffic.
Yeah. No, I think all those kinds of things are on the table, and designated pickup spots have totally already been utilized, right, in like Uber and Lyft apps, so. And sometimes done in partnership, and we've tested some of them before in Davis Square in specific spots where we want to encourage Uber and Lyft pickups rather than, you know, in the middle of the bike lane or in the spot or on the crosswalk.
Does your hand?
Yeah, are there any, like, do you know of any examples other than the airport? Because the airport's like a kind of like specific thing.
Right.
Like there's a whole process. Are there any like precedents that you know of?
That's a good question. I don't know. Do you know?
I know Vegas restricts it pretty heavily. They have to have specific spots they can pick up or drop off, or otherwise they're not allowed to operate in the city or county technically, but
And
so.
is there a way that like Uber can say like, no, you cannot get picked up in this location, you have to go here? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
great.
it just,
Cool.
it gives you options, like you can choose here are the options where you can get picked up or dropped off. Which isn't so different than I think how Uber Pool or whatever, the like the group rides pre-pandemic that they used to offer.
And I believe we used to, I think they piloted a pickup drop-off zone, that sort of they stopped recommending on their app, and also we decommissioned because it became part of a protected bike lane, but it has been something that they've been thinking about in Somerville, and so I think it's definitely always on the table.
One other thing I wanted to bring up about the deliveries is it does really impact the air quality along the main Elm Street, which I find myself personally avoiding Davis Square, especially in like hot months when there's just like tons of exhaust and stuff. So I wonder, like, I think that could actually very much help businesses where even if, you know, a delivery driver might have to walk 1 or 2 minutes from a parking lot to get to a location, it will also increase people actually going to the square. And I also wonder, like, this is probably a wider city thing, but I wonder why there's not as many like bike delivery people. I mean, Somerville is very small, and I'm from New York, but everyone is on their e-bikes there, which is a problem in and of itself. But I think here we can kind of potentially like swing the other way in terms of, you know, that's when I get Uber Eats, sometimes it's like a mile away. It's a pretty quick e-bike ride, especially with the high levels of congestion that are limiting vehicle speeds anyway. So,
Yeah, and Boston is doing that e-cargo bike pilot right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
So I don't know if there's like eagerness for that and something like that in Somerville. I'd be interested.
But another point on what you're saying is during the pandemic, we had almost closed, or I think it was significantly reduced. And lots of tables and the restaurants were serving food outside. But it wasn't that pleasant because every time there was a bus passing by, and the bus, like I said, this is very disruptive to the pedestrian space. So I'm not sure if we can enhance that, but it is something that I noticed when I went there. It's like, yeah, sure, you can try to have some fun and in the street, but like it's not really that much fun when the bus is passing by all the time. Even when the street was reduced, even when it was just pretty much buses and bikes at the time.
Karen, do you have another question, or is your hand just up from the last time?
No, I just put it up to answer a question that came up a minute ago regarding a predetermined spot for rideshare. This is before the pandemic, but I'm pretty sure a few times I went to Assembly and I in a Lyft or Uber, and I got dropped off and picked up at a spot near Mike's Pastry, you know, that end. And I think at the time, I don't know if it was just a pilot or some short-lived thing, and I don't know what the deal is now, but there at that time it was a designated spot. I don't know if it's the only designated spot there, and I don't know if it's still around, but I'm just throwing it out there that it was one at one time.
I am going to move us on to the signal improvements, just because we don't have that much more time in this agenda item. But I imagine that this is not the last time we're going to talk about Davis Square, because each of the things in the proposal is something that we could have a whole meeting about. So looking forward to continued conversations. So signal improvements.
Great, so as you might have already experienced, we made some signal upgrades in Davis Square. This is a joint project with the MBTA, funded by the Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, to help move buses through more comfortably and reliably, as well as increase safety with upgraded curb ramps and signal phasings. This slide's quite dense, so I'm just going to read it at a high level, but check them out in the materials. If you're also interested in really diving into the details, if you go to somervillema.gov/Davis curbs, which is if you're paying attention to any of the construction, it was the same website used to talk about construction updates and various improvements. It's actually a full slide deck, which walks you through every signal or every phase of the signal and kind of which approach is going when and why certain decisions were made. Just wanted to kind of share a couple of highlights. So traffic signal phasing, that's when each street gets a green light. So a couple of things that we really focus on changing is removing the condition where the walk sign was on for pedestrians to cross Dover. So it's, right by Mr. Craig. At the same time that people driving had the green light coming from Highland. So they would kind of go forward, and again, you had that potential conflict. So that is removed in the new signal phase. We also removed the condition where the walk sign was on for pedestrians to cross College Ave, close to Highland Ave, so it's like right at the corner on the edge, right when Highland used to get that right turn, and all of a sudden it would conflict with folks crossing. And then secondly, remove the condition where the walk sign was on for pedestrians to cross College Ave right by the busway or the Davis Square Station entrance. At the same time that buses had the green light, right? Because they would be trying to turn out, but you're like, I also have the walk sign. So those are kind of like the big pedestrian improvements, along with new curb ramps and some of the moving of the crosswalks. For the equipment, you'll now see, if you're driving, you'll see flashing, or if you're just standing there too, flashing yellow arrows for if you're taking a right turn from College onto Holland and on Holland onto Dover. And we also added a flashing yellow for the left turn from Highland. If it's easier for me to just show this in visual, I'm happy to as well. Just wanted to show some of the highlights. And then there were we narrowed the width of Highland for vehicles, so you remove that right turn lane and south protected bike lane. And then move the crosswalk that was formerly, like right in front of Oak to the island in front of Mike's, that has now been moved to connect with right in front of CVS. Because we're really trying to remove that conflict of folks turning from from Day onto Elm when that cross signal was on. Still to come is right now the transit signal priority is it's still in the midst of being implemented. It takes time to kind of there's a kind of like what's the word? It's not algorithm, but
yeah, it needs to be calibrated. So it's like the intaking the information, and it'll be learning and sort of like adjusting the signal schedule based on what traffic patterns are.
Yeah, but again, this is to allow that as the bus approaches the signal, that it more often gets the green and can move faster through the intersection. Again, that's what kind of the focus of transit signal priority is. And then we also will be striping the crosswalk across Elm, right, like I said, at that CVS with higher quality paint. Just had some limitations given that it was implemented in the winter. It's harder to put pavement markings on asphalt at that time. Adding yield markings in front of the crosswalk that correspond with those flashing yellow arrows. And then I think actually today, the new lane assignment signage was installed on Highland Ave, really just to indicate folks which lane to be in when you're approaching the intersection, if you're making various turns or moving straight through. This is at a very high level, but if you're actually interested in digging into this, we've put together a resource available on that Davis Curbs website that walks you through each phase. So you have 5 phases, and in this visual, you'll see when cars have the green light, cars or buses, when crosswalk signals are on, and when that, what we call that permissive yellow, or to allow that turn is on. All in all, this is give or take about 100 seconds. And one of the goals of this is that we know that it is not a comfortable experience for someone walking right when you have to wait so long at the crosswalk. Because some of this is to allow that not to be too lengthy of an overall cycle that allows more crossing opportunities more frequently. So these are kind of the estimated lengths, and I say estimate mainly because as I try to train the signal priority is working, there's gonna be wiggle room in those phases, right? One will be shortened to allow the green light through, and one could be slightly lengthened, right, to wait for that bus to go. So it's just give or take about 100 seconds, and then within those phases, you have between that 14 to 24-second phase.
And then many of them do have a long leading pedestrian interval as well,
That is
so.
true, yeah, at Dover Street, there's about a 7-second leading pedestrian interval, so you'll get that crossing earlier. And I forget exactly the other ones, but yes, those are supposed to turn, some of them will turn on slightly earlier than if there's vehicles going by them.
And I guess to clarify, if that's a new terminology for anyone, when we say like leading pedestrian interval, that just means the pedestrian crossing and the crosswalk gets their pedestrian signal sort of saying you can cross before the cars get a green light. So it's to help cars or pedestrians get in front of cars and be visible before that conflict could occur.
Yeah, and so the reason if you look at phase 1, which is on the far left side of the screen, you'll see that kind of yellow, that yellow stripe for vehicles coming from Holland Street turning right onto Dover. That crosswalk gets turned on 7 seconds earlier than that they get that green and the flashing yellow. Sorry if I didn't explain that very clearly.
And is that the same to cross Holland as well?
I don't know if it's the same across Holland. It was really where there might be conflict. So yeah, it could be the case for Holland, given when College Ave is on. Our team member, Adam Polinsky, goes into detail in this resource if you're interested in kind of diving into each of these phases. We do have those slides available, or we could bring those up if we want to talk about them very specifically now, but also available on that Davis Curbs website. I just want to kind of, a couple other highlights of still to come is that when we do any of these projects, we like to do evaluation. So we've been doing various observations to see how is it running, but we're also taking feedback. There are adjustments that we can be made. And again, we know that there will probably be always talking about Davis Square, correct? But we're trying to think through how do we make it safer? We make the buses move through faster, and just really work with such a complex intersection that has so many approaches and turns.
I have a couple of comments. I don't know if it's a good time or.
Yeah, go ahead,
wait.
Zach.
I don't know about so I don't know what the latest adjustments are. I would say that in my experience, we probably need some more adjustment work, specifically on the crosswalk across Elm near Day Street. So I think that when we go from phase 3 to phase 4, what I've seen is that cars are still coming from College Ave onto Elm. So they're like still halfway through the intersection when the pedestrian light turns on. And so they're going pretty quickly, as you're kind of about to step out and walk. And then I think also, and I'm not sure what the best solution is for this, but so also during that phase for the left from Highland Ave onto Elm, I think cars are swinging around that left turn pretty fast and not necessarily expecting to see pedestrians in the middle of the street there. So maybe we can do some signage or shorten that left turn phase or something. But yeah, I think last time I did those crossings, it was kind of scary. So yep, those are my comments.
Hi, this is Caroline. I also similarly in phase 3 and phase 4 with taking away the right-hand turn off of Highland or that right-hand turn lane, cars are really backing up there and I think are more aggravated and then feel like they have to make that light, causing the speeding and like the really fast left turn onto Elm that Zach just described. And then because of the loss of that lane, I see cars being more aggressive further back on Highland and especially the crosswalk in front of the Kamikaze and in front of the Five Horses restaurant. Those need more signs and flashing lights, anything like that. I know it's not included in these photos, but the backup on Highland has really increased.
No, thank you both for sharing that.
What was the previous total cycle time from before the redesign was completed?
Goodness, I'm sorry, I don't have that off the top of my head. I thought it was approaching closer to 2 minutes, maybe over. But I'm happy to follow up with that.
Cool. So it has been reduced. That's good.
I believe so.
I will say that we are hoping to do kind of another follow-up meeting on the signal improvements that dive more deeply into them once we actually have the ability to experience the intersection a little bit more. So in the next few months, probably. So look forward to that as well. I will just say that I am extremely happy to have the conflict with crosswalks on College eliminated because those are the ones that I primarily use. So very happy to see that. Anything else before we move on to our next agenda item?
I have one thing, actually.
Yeah.
On College Avenue, at the top of the picture, there's a bike lane that I don't know if it's supposed to be protected with plastic bollards, but as of the last time that I've been on there, they're not installed. And someone has mentioned that they will be installed.
Yeah. So I hope you get to go there soon because they were installed this week. I haven't been able to verify with my own eyes.
I think I've seen the photo. I think
Yeah.
Amazing.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
that's good to hear. I'm going there tomorrow, so.
Yeah. And thank you for your patience. That took time to get in.
One other question that talking about bikes, can you think of for on phase 4 coming off of Highland, can the bikes also take a right-hand turn there?
Yeah, so there's nothing blocking them from taking the right. It's more of that, as you can see, then the right is eliminated in the phase 5, that then allow more protection for the bike to go forward.
Okay, so bikes could take that turn anytime, just they need to be yielding to pedestrians.
Yeah,
Whenever there's those cycles. Okay.
yeah. Yeah, it's something because it doesn't really stop you as biking. It's more of that we didn't want the vehicles to be turning onto bikes and there's now a bike signal.
All right. Cool. Great discussion, everyone. I'm going to move us on to our next agenda item, which is proposed fare changes for the MBTA. So great, we have another presentation.
Awesome. Yeah. So thank you, everyone. And just like on the previous 2 topics, just want to reminder, the city's always taking feedback. So Kate and I are listening and taking minutes to take back to the team. But if you think of anything after this meeting on either project, always feel free to send us an email or submit feedback online. So I'm going to talk about the MBTA fare proposals for this year, 2024. Most notably, this really exciting fare proposal to expand eligibility into the reduced fare program to encompass a sort of low income ridership qualifications. And so on the left, you see a poster of the MBTA of the 3 fare changes that they are proposing for this upcoming year. What we'll be focusing on today is the new reduced fare program, but also if you're interested, there are some small changes happening to the tickets and making the commuter rail weekend pass to include holidays. And so the main program, this reduced fare program, would provide riders who are between the age of 26 and 64 who don't qualify for the TAP programs, non-disabled riders, and have a low income to be able to purchase reduced fares, approximately 50% off all MBTA modes, or a link pass. So this would be unlimited bus and subway ridership for $30 a month, as opposed to the current full price $90 a month. And so this is something the MBTA is working with Health and Human Services of the state on, registering motor vehicles. So it's going to be quite like a large program. And they are looking to hire a third-party community-based partner to manage the in-person customer service and eligibility verification of this program. And we got a lot of feedback in the past that to access some of the reduced fare programs, like the senior Charlie card, I mean, previous quite limited in terms of if you don't have like an in-community support. So the Somerville Council of Aging will host community events to help connect riders. But if that's not available in your city, the only in-person option is the downtown Charlie card store. And so I think by partnering with this third-party community-based partner, it'll hopefully be a bit more of an accessible intake process. And so the income eligibility for this program is proposed to be either enrollment in an existing state benefit program. So you can think of SNAP, Mass Health, and or a cutoff of 200% of the federal poverty line if you want to go the income verification route. And if this sounds familiar to you, it's because the city of Somerville is currently running a pilot with our community-based partner, the CAS, Community Action Agency of Somerville, using ARPA dollars to provide free transit passes for Somerville residents who meet this exact same eligibility criteria, because we were really advocating for having more reduced fare options available to riders. And I know we talked about this in January, so I don't want to repeat everything we've learned from our pilots, but we found it to be hugely impactful in terms of people accessing transit, taking this to complete routes, and whether that's them saying, oh, I've been switching off, so it's helped me use a car less, or I don't have a car at home, I don't have access, this is my transportation, and I'm able to take more trips. And in particular, in focus groups we did with participants in the fall, medical trips, therapy, you know, a lot of these like critical access opportunities I think we all think about were mentioned by a lot of the participants. So I really just want to elevate the importance of these programs. And so here's just a brief overview of what the MBTA's landscape of current reduced fares looks like. And so you can go online, they have a full breakdown of by every mode, what the exact pricing is. This is just a small snapshot showing you subway, bus, the range of commuter rail and ferry, but pretty much it is typically around a 50% cost versus what the full priced fare would be across all MBTA modes. And most critically, they have said for this program, it would also include the ride. So if you are a current ride user, that's their paratransit service. If you would meet the eligibility for this new reduced fare program, you could apply those reduced fares to accessing the ride. And so some of the existing reduced fare programs that are currently in flight and that Somerville participates in is the Senior Charlie Card program. So for riders age 65 plus, the Transportation Access Pass, this is for riders with a disability, and then the Youth Pass, which is for young adults, so ages 18 to 26 with low income. And then if you're wondering, we also provide student passes, but at the Somerville Public Schools, these are completely free. So that's where you get your access from that grade 7 to grade 12 age period. So next steps, where is this proposal going? The MBTA is currently seeking public comment on this proposal. So there have been a number of public meetings. I think most notably, there's a couple still to come in February, including the one fully virtual one on February 27th at the end of this month. So that's the information you see on the right, and the links are all on the MBTA, both events page, but also on the reduced fare page itself. So I can send that around. Public comment is due Thursday, February 29th, and you can email it to their public engagement email account, as well as share it at the public meetings. The next step after closing the public comment period is they'll be doing a Title VI. So this is sort of the federal disproportionate burden analysis that they need to do any large scale fare change. And this will be shared at the March MBTA Board of Directors meeting. And they're also hoping they put out their proposal to hire a third-party partner in January. So we'll be hearing soon about who's applied and maybe who they've selected to come. So I'll pause there for any questions or discussion on this proposal. I guess I will share the city is going to be submitting public comment, just sharing with the MBTA the experience we've had, what we've learned from the pilots that we've run. And just, we are really excited to see this. I think it fills a really important gap where before, if you were between the ages of 26 and 64, there wasn't really an avenue for you to access reduced fares, which is pretty critical when you think of the choices, $90, and now it could be 30.
Kind of related. Is there any mechanism for if if like a user that's qualifying spends, let's say $30 in the month on regular fares or regular reduced fares, that automatically gets upgraded to the monthly pass so that they're not like torn making a financial decision between, do I do individual fares, which is going to be cheaper for me, individual fares, monthly pass?
A great question. I don't believe under the current Charlie card system there is, but I think there's a lot more capabilities with AFC 2.0, which is sort of their new fare payment system. So I wonder if something like that would be available. And I don't know if they did or tried it for day late caps, but I think they've had more success, at least other agencies, checking the daily cap. So I wonder if in the future it would be a monthly cap, but I'd have to check on that. I'm sorry, I don't have a great answer.
Okay, just curious.
I just wanted to say that New York City has a program that's sort of not quite like the way you're describing, but similar, the Omni program.
They have a weekly cap.
It's like, yeah, it's weekly. So if you tap using the same card, I think it's more than 7 times, maybe it's 12 times.
12 times.
Then the rest of your rides for the week are free.
I don't know if I had that. That's nice.
And that's the same vendor as the new payment system that MBTA will be getting. So I assume that I don't know if they have the policy, but I assume they will have the technical capabilities when that comes online.
Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I actually had a question. Is that tapped because New York doesn't use the MTA cards right anymore, so that if you're using like a credit.
They're phasing them out, but they still have them
Okay.
now, but you do have to use the credit card.
Okay, so it's like if you tap your own card, so just.
Which means that you have to have a credit card.
Yes, yeah, and then, because I was thinking too, like, if someone's using a Charlie card, they would have to have an account anyway, right?
Right, but
Yeah.
you already can have a Charlie card account, that's how the bike
Yeah.
garages work, right?
Yes, so I think that is an important note. So you can get a Charlie card, but there are sort of additional benefits if you register your Charlie card. So if you have a Charlie card and haven't registered it, do that because it helps you reclaim balance if you lose your card. And I think that's how you get access to the bike rooms. And that would be the best place to check that if they have daily or weekly or monthly caps, which I'm sorry, I just can't think of the top of my head. That's how they would be able to connect the pieces. And so I think they're really moving to more of like a card-based system than, tickets where you don't get some of the transfer benefits you now get.
Well, on the same lines, they could do something similar for the short trip kind of behavior. So if you're just going to the supermarket, coming back right away, like today, you're gonna pay $5 on the bus, right? $2.40 to go, $2.40 to come back. For a purchase that you're gonna do, you're not filling your car, so it's gonna be, $50, 70 max on the supermarket. Then you spend $5 just on transit. It gets to the point where it doesn't really make much sense. So if they could increase those, or just use the same system they have for the T-Now with validations, to avoid the second charge when people are returning back home, that could be helpful as well.
Good transfer now, though, I think, right? I mean, if.
Yeah.
Within a certain amount of time. So you wouldn't pay for the second trip.
Right. Or it could be just discounted. The thing is like the perceived value has to drop. Right, because you're not gonna spend, so if you go for a full day of work, 8 hours of work, then sure, $5 is fine. But if you're just going to visit the place, come back, it might not be anymore. So it's all about, on people's minds, I think it's all about that perceived value there.
So I think we talked about this a little bit last month, but with these changes, this would essentially be a scaling up of the program that Somerville already has, right? So we would not need to find like money in our city budget to continue funding these kinds of low income programs anymore. Is that correct?
There's sort of an important distinction.
Okay.
Yeah, so this is a scaling up of the programs the MBTA currently runs, in which someone can, again, buy like a $30 a month monthly pass, and so there is a cost. The city is currently running with ARPA dollars, so they're all pilot programs, 100% free transit passes, where we're working with a community partner like CAS to hand those out. And so it doesn't fully take the place because the pilots are 100% free. This would require, some money to be spent, and it's also, this would be a permanent offering by the MBTA, whereas ours are more of a ARPA pilot, so we have the time limit on the money in terms of when we can send it until, so we are hoping this will help, a lot of those participants continue accessing fares, but it's not exactly one for one.
Okay, and this would not necessarily like lower the amount of money that the city would have to spend to like continue providing fully free, right? Because I'm thinking like, oh, if now the cost is $30 versus $90,
Yes.
we have to like front less of the money for the program to continue in the future.
That's a great question, and one that we're hoping to get more clarity over how this would be operated. So is it a possibility for someone like a city or community partner to like buy a lot of these, or do these have to be bought by the person who has like the individual eligibility? I think we only sort of know at a high level what the operating plan would be, so hopefully when they announce the community-based partner, we'd have more clarity if it would help the city more affordably provide this.
Interesting.
One thing I want to highlight is the importance of the commuter rail passes, since the commuter rail is so much more expensive and also serves like farther out communities that probably have a lower income levels. So for Somerville, we have the Porter Square Station, which has a big catchment area inside of Somerville. So I hope to see more like integration between the fare system. So when you transfer from bus to commuter rail, you're not paying double, well, not double, but a lot more, or from subway to commuter rail. And I also think, I wonder, maybe I'll submit a comment to the MBTA, but I wonder what the actual funding implications of even further discounting the commuter rail passes would be, since I know a lot of low income riders just avoid the commuter rail and will take parallel bus routes, which causes congestion on those routes. And they could ultimately be saving a lot of time by using the commuter rail instead.
Do we have any data on how much does this program the city is running to assess eligibility of partners cost? Like, what's the equation there, and can it be expanded?
In terms of what we pay for CAS to do intake eligibility?
Yeah, so if we want to expand the program right now that the city has, does that make sense? you know, what's the amount of dollars there that is going to be required to say to support an expansion of the curve?
To buy the like 100% free transit passes?
Yeah.
Yeah, so right now we're
Both
buying.
in terms of the passes themselves, but also the hourly wages of the people having to assess
Mhm.
people's incomes.
Yeah, and so we're working with CAS to estimate the time it takes for each person supported in the program. So we just have a sense of, it's about an hour per intake to get someone into the office, like check the paperwork, hand them physically their card. I think we found a lot more success of doing things in person. Because we're a smaller city, it's less of a barrier. When you mail the cards, people lose them. They have to come pick them up anyways. It gets a bit more complicated. So it's about an hour for intake. And then you have, an additional like half hour for maintenance of cards. We replace lost cards, things like that. So you can start using the time estimates to figure out cost wise, depending on, like how the community based organization is structured, what it will cost. We're currently buying all of our passes at $90 a month because we can just buy those passes and do the eligibility ourselves, whereas for reduced fares, there's an eligibility step the MBTA carries. So I think that's to us the biggest question mark of what this would cost in the future. And then there's additional just complications of types of funding sources you can use for means tested programs, but that's a small caveat.
All right. So our last agenda item on the meeting is a little bit inside baseball, but this is just a review of our draft annual report, which I would love to share on my screen. And just give like a very quick run through and then see if anybody has thoughts, things that they think we've missed. Or if folks think it's, good to put out into the world. I still have to write like my letter from the chair or whatever. Although I feel maybe I don't have to because that seems like a weird, I don't know, formality. In any case, this is what we have so far. So basically structured by listing our committee members, our areas of activity is kind of the biggest portion of this. So split into kind of the focus area that we really honed in on last year on the role of enforcement in street safety and digging into that question, outlining all of our letters that we wrote 3 last year, the projects that we reviewed. Media engagement just refers to like who we invited to our meetings to speak and the kind of guests that we welcomed at our meetings. And then outlining the events that we did over this past year. And then it gets into the goals that we outlined at the beginning of 2023, kind of the progress that we made on them, which we discussed at, I think our December meeting, I want to say. And then just like outlining our priorities that came of that initial discussion for 2024. I will say that we will very excitingly be welcoming new members, as everyone knows, and will incorporate their priorities into our goals for 2024. But I think the hope is to maybe get this report out a little bit earlier than would be required to like incorporate those priorities officially into the report. Although if folks have strong feelings on that, then, I don't think there's necessarily urgency to posting this, right? Like no one's going to pound at our doors asking where's the PTAC annual report. But, if folks feel strongly that we should hold it until our new members come on, then I think that is perfectly reasonable. So maybe just to highlight a little bit, enforcement, really just talking about like the types of conversations that we had and very much acknowledging that there is not consensus on the committee, but kind of drawing together some threads of like why we recognize this conversation as important. So talking about the parking department meeting, our livable streets report meeting, the various or the presentation that Mobility gave on their approach to enforcement within the Vision Zero framework, and then our conversation with the SPD. Letters, we all know the letters we wrote. Project review, we gave feedback on 5 projects that are still ongoing. Meeting engagement, we had a lot of presentations and a lot of guests. And events, we hosted a lot of events last year, you guys. We hosted 3 community walks, a lot of tablings, and some gatherings. And we made a good amount of progress on a lot of our goals. And then for 2024, just to remind folks, our biggest priorities that we decided on were welcoming new committee members and onboarding them effectively, digging into school mobility, especially with all of the short and long-term changes around schools in Somerville, and then continuing our conversations around enforcement, because it would be great to come to some sort of agreement that we could kind of voice a committee stance on. And then working on some other projects as well, some internal goals for committee rubrics for evaluation, returning to the citywide parking and curb use study, monitoring the bus network redesign, monitoring the snow clearing pilot, especially because we got snow this year, so we'll actually have something to look into. That's true, the last one was kind of fake. Then trash recycling pickup, no turn on red signs, returning to that conversation. Safe Streets Ordinance, I noticed that the Legislative Matters Committee did host their first conversation on the Safe Streets Ordinance last Tuesday, but it was on the same night as the McGrath public meeting, so I was very angry about their scheduling. But we should definitely return to that conversation as well. I'll probably watch the meeting or the recording. And then talking about opportunities to extend the Green Line, which I'm sure will not be accomplished in this year, but sometime in the future. Any thoughts on the report? Anything you think is glaringly wrong? Thank you very much, Meredith, for your kind words and support. Any other thoughts?
Looks awesome.
Thanks, Zach.
I wonder if we should invite the city staff to have a word on maybe what worked in the past year. Brad, Justine, Lauren, like you guys are here with us all the time, so it's you can participate on this as well and kind of give us some feedback on what was the most important thing we did that maybe changed people's minds a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is amazing. I think doing this is amazing. I think, I'm trying to think of the things we've heard the most about. Community walks. I think we've heard just so much good feedback. People felt it gave them like really meaningful engagement in the project. And I think reaching out to others to partner on community walks and broadening the perspectives of the committee. I'll say, I think the advocacy letters on policy issues have been really impactful this year. I think those have always been some of my favorite to see. So I just really appreciate the time, because I know you spend a lot of time putting together those advocacy letters. And then I do think having the sustained thread through multiple meetings was also a really interesting thing you arranged last year, enforcement. I think that we came at it from so many angles. We were able to have a very deep discussion. So yeah, those are my top of mind thoughts, but I'll ask Justin and Brad to share theirs.
Like you say, on the engagement side, I mean, being able to collaborate has been huge, and it changes the whole approach. So I really appreciate the committee's commitment to that. And actually, even I think Alessandra recruited you at that table.
She did.
Yeah.
Well, kind of. We went to a transportation conference together, and I was like, Nick, you should join.
I was like, okay, wait, I was at a table with P-Tech when I met Nick. And so I encourage folks to continue that. It does make a huge difference, as well as I hope the connection to people can be really helpful, right? As representatives for the whole city.
Awesome. Well, I'm not hearing anybody who hates this report. So maybe in the interest of, or I guess just to pose the explicit question, like, are folks comfortable putting this out into the world without welcoming new members onto the committee first, or would people prefer to kind of hold until that happens?
No, we can put it out, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
I say just publish.
All right, then I propose, or I guess I motion to, I will either write a letter from the chair or just delete that section and then, you know, give it to the city to post on the website. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thanks, Ted. Oh, great, Meredith's also comfortable just publishing it. All in favor for getting this out into the world, please say aye.
All right,
Aye.
Aye, from Meredith, great. All opposed? Beautiful. 2023 annual report. All done. And I think, sorry, were you gonna say something, Ted?
I was just gonna say for any potential members who are here, this is like a lot of work and Alessandra did it all, so love to have support on that in the future. So hope that some of you are interested in writing annual reports and coming out to tabling and all that stuff.
That's right. Yes, also, if anybody else wants to, you know, chair this committee when they join. I mean, I love doing it so much, but I'm also in grad school again, so it just takes a lot of time. Anyhow, I think that is our meeting. Thanks, everyone. See you next month.
Thank you.
Oh, I can stop.